many conversations with people about spiritual things, and I'll quote the Bible, and they may agree with me on the nice things, but then when they hear things that they don't like to hear, they will say, well, the Bible contradicts itself. So the question is, does the Bible contradict itself?
Yeah, I've heard it a lot, and I've actually gone into debates about this contradictions in the Bible and looked at some of them. Before I do it though, you've got to set some ground rules, and here's 3 of them. You've got to distinguish or define what a contradiction is, what a paradox is, and what a mystery is. Let me explain. A contradiction, if, for example, I say this person had a blue shirt, and you say the person had a white shirt, that's not a contradiction, because he could have had a blue and white striped shirt. Now, if I say that he had a white shirt, you said there was no white on his shirt, that's a contradiction. So the first thing you got to do is define what a contradiction is. Now, there's also something called a paradox. For example, if I say to you, you say, what did you do for lunch today? And I say, well, I went to the drive-thru. And someone else asks me and says, what did you do for lunch today? And I say, I put gas in my car. You guys get your stories together, sounds like a contradiction. But if you look a little closer, you see within an hour, I have plenty of time to do both. That's a paradox. A biblical example would be one where John, for example, says Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled over. Matthew records it as Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb and saw that it had been rolled over. Atheists, biblical critics claim that that's a contradiction, but clearly they're not. There's just a paradox. One only records Mary Magdalene, the other one does not. Now, if you finish reading John, she goes to Peter and says the stone was rolled over and we do not know where they laid the body. So she right there in John claims that there was someone else with her. Okay, and then finally is mystery. What is a mystery? A mystery is something that we cannot understand. Now, even though we can understand it because we have finite minds and it's an infinite proposition, there still cannot be a contradiction within it. And obviously the most popular one is the Trinity, 3 persons, 1 in essence. No contradiction there, but definitely something we have a hard time explaining. And let me mention one more thing, and that would be content. When you're having these discussions, it's important that you look at content. For example, Jesus says, my yoke is easy. Later on, he says that you will be persecuted because of me. Now, some people would claim that is a contradiction, but if you look at the content, he's speaking of 2 entirely different things. So, given these rules, there are absolutely no contradictions, not even one in the Bible.
Now, one of the things I'll hear is that, well, in one place in the New Testament it says that Judas hung himself. The other place it says he was split open on the rocks. His entrails came out. And you can look at that and say, wow, there's 2 different accounts of the death of Judas.
Sure.
Well, in ancient times, in his Jewish practices, they wouldn't touch dead bodies. So he hung himself, they cut him, and his body split open on the rocks.
Both can happen within that time frame.
And one of my other favorites is when they talk about Paul's shipwrecks, and they say, well, Paul's it says right here, his shipwrecked, he was in 2 shipwrecks. And then over here it says he was in 3. Well, what happened? Well, first he was in 2, then he was in 3. Yeah. It's just a little further down the timeline. You got to use some common sense when reading the Bible.
Yeah, that I guess that's the best rule. Use some common sense, read the entire content, and you'll find that there is absolutely no contradictions in the Bible. Unlike every other world religion, incidentally.